looking at what is the path. That's what we're talking about today. It's all the possibilities. It's a new year, infinite possibilities. And we're starting with the Centers for Spiritual Living. We have our global themes, and we're starting our new theme for the year, which is living out loud. It's about living our spiritual principles out loud and not just keeping them something we think about on Sunday morning, but what about the whole rest of the week, right? And does it really make a difference in our life? So this month, it's about root and reboot. So we're going to root in the spiritual principles and reboot our lives, right? So I and this morning I'm going to talk about opening to new beginnings, right? And so, it's the new year. We should feel excited, it's great and new beginnings but when the new year started for me, I felt depressed. And so, I'm the minister. I should be excited. This should happen for me, something new. And there's time to exercise. I can lose that little bit of weight and get in shape, and I can unpack some of those boxes in our house and hang the artwork up. This is a great chance, and decorate our home, explore some new places, meet new friends. Isn't this wonderful? But life is not unfolding the way that I had hoped. There's the snow. Now, we prayed for the snow. We love the moisture, and the lake is filling up. It's going to be a great summer, but perhaps this is too much. And particularly when it comes on Saturday night and Sunday morning and we can't Zoom, or it says it's going to come and then it doesn't. And so instead of Zooming, we show up here, a little frazzled, but we're here. This is great. You're all here with me. But maybe this is the new Tahoe way of living with climate change, right? Now, there's also a lot of things changing here at the center. What's our path forward? How will my job change? And things are underfoot there. And so there's this confusion, frustration, fear of the unknown. I mean, I think they have more trouble with than anything is not knowing what the next step forward is, right? How do you guys feel about that, right? So what about that desire for new experiences? Let's coming back to it, and it should be this feeling of joy and renewal, but here I was. So what did I do? I sat down and I meditated. As my mentor would always tell me, all right, get yourself in that chair, girl, and don't get up till you know what you're going to do. Kind of like Buddha looking for enlightenment or something. And so I started breathing, just like Nancy was talking about in the meditation this morning. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and letting it fill my whole stomach and chest and my whole being, and breathing out. And when you do that, something happens. Nancy mentioned that it has a calming effect. But there's something about it where it gets that chi going in our body. It lets us let go of the worry and the fear and the feeling of being held back, whatever it is, and being irrevocably tied to the past. There's just the present. There's just the moment. And that's when the shift begins. And so all of that stuff around me began to crumble. It didn't have the same power. Right? And, it's like when you've been sitting too long and you stand up and first you're just aching, and just the muscles are so stiff and whatever. But then, if you watch a cat, we have a cat and they just stretch. I've never seen them get so long for, one little being that's this big and then becomes this big, right? And they just stretch and they just look so content and happy when they get done. And so it was like that for me. And it was about energizing and connecting with that inner source. It's not out there. All this stuff is just ephemeral. It can change. But what lasts, what's always there, is this connection with spirit within. So that is where I begin. This is one reason we like to do yoga before we meditate, because it allows us to stretch and breathe, or just do the breathing exercises, energization they do before the self-realization exercises, meditation on Thursday, or Tai Chi on Thursday afternoon. We have lots of options here at the center, but it's about the breath and about going within, connecting with spirit. And so as I was doing that, I started to see the vibrancy of God. That divine life force that's in everything. I looked out at the snow, and what I saw was the snow glistening, right? I saw the trees with their beautiful white cover hanging on the trees and making them, almost covering them up entirely, some of the trees, right? And the fresh snow, the world around me was alive. I could feel it vibrating. It was almost like it was tingling with life. And my relationships and all of life are fueled and empowered by this same life force, that one life force. And I could feel it within me, that life force. I could feel wholeness. And throughout my body, my heart, and my arms, and my legs, and my mind, and my thought, all my muscles felt ready to go. There was joy. There was freedom. It was feeling fully alive. Right? So I was centered in the infinite invisible that is the source of all life. I was in the here and now. All was good. All is good. There is only the now. So it's a new year. A new day is dawning. We're open to a new beginning. So now I want to talk a little bit now. Now we've got this great feeling. But then we get up after the meditation and life begins again. So how do we take that feeling and manifest it in our everyday life? And this is what living out loud is all about, right? So it happens at many levels. There's this experience, this spiritual experience, that level of the being level, the being of ground. And it lifts us up and out of a rut that we've been in, whatever that rut is, so we can see the spiritual truth that's underneath, right? So when we see something that we don't want any more of that, but we can look underneath and see that there is this spiritual truth that is the actual truth that needs to come forward, and we call it forward. And in our experiences and in our perceptions of other people as well as ourselves. So for the Living Out Loud theme, Reverend David Robertson co-chaired the 2023 Global Themes team. And he said, we can know about our spiritual principles in the co-creation process. We can timidly apply our principles, or we can stand up and dance and play and live our principles out loud. And that's what we want to do, right? So how do we put our spiritual principles into practice and bring that spiritual glimpse of that divine possibilities into form? How do we manifest that vision? So we have to begin where we sometimes find ourselves, which is in a rut. And it's a comfort zone, that rut, usually, whether it's good or bad. But we know what it's about. It's the same. It was the same yesterday and the day before, and we can rely on it to be the same tomorrow. But there's a principle that the past tends to repeat itself, and we see this in all different fields, and we've heard it many times. So the scientists observe that an object that's in motion tends to stay in motion in that same direction unless it's acted upon by another force. It changes the direction, right? So if you're going around a corner when you're driving, when you turn a corner, it actually takes more energy to turn the corner than it does to go straight. And we find that out sometimes when we're driving on the snow. We just want to go straight, right? And but the historians also talk about history repeats itself. Unless we learn from the past and try to change our responses to similar circumstances, right? Something has to change. There's a new field of epigenetics that's come out in biology, and they've recently observed that the genes in our DNA are turned off and on by chemicals that are produced by the environment, by the food we eat, by our physical actions, and by hormones that are produced in response to our emotions. Right? So this is our emotions, our thinking really do affect not only what's happening today, but our DNA that we pass on to the next generation. And that's why a lot of there's generational trauma locked into the DNA. Racism is locked into the DNA. So we work, but we can also change it. When we get stuck and the biologists are looking at knowing this, looking at ways that they can use the epigenetic treatments to prevent or cure cancer or diabetes or some other chronic illnesses that come out of these genes. Now, when we find ourselves in a rut, caught in some kind of negative personal or global circumstances that are repeating over and over, we could respond as a victim. And we could just resign ourselves to accept that we're just stuck in this endless repeating cycle. And that's just the way life is, we could just say, and regretfully, but that's just the way it is. But and we could really dig into that rut by just continually complaining about how awful things are, right? I mean, I know there's some people that do this, and it's pretty entertaining, more for them maybe than for us. But it really it won't get you out of the rut, because it's just repeating the pattern over and over and over. The endlessness that can't get away from it. Well, in Science of Mind and other new thought beliefs, we teach two spiritual principles. First, it's done unto us as we believe. So if we believe we're in a rut and we're destined to stay there, guess what? We get to stay there. But if we change our thinking, second principle, we change our life. And so that is what we're talking about today. We can learn from those scientists, the historians, biologists, and new thought practitioners and choose to set in motion a new thought, a new expectation, a new response to the way things have always been. Now, you probably all of you have played ping pong at some point in your life, and when you really get it going, you get that ping pong ball going back from one person to the next and back and forth and back and forth, and it can go on quite a long time. And what if that's kind of symbolic of this vicious cycle that we're in? And so what if when someone hits a ping pong ball to you, you could hit it back, or you could step aside and let it just go by, or you could hit it off in some other direction and totally change the game, right? So, but if we keep on doing the same thing and expect different results, they think they call that insanity or something like that, right? There's also another analogy in China. The character for crisis is a combination of two characters. It's the character for danger and the character for opportunity, that they overlap. Then they're together, right? And so a crisis has both danger and opportunity. Which path do we choose? We have the opportunity to change what's going on. And a lot of the biggest businesses that have ever been established during times of crisis. During war, the pandemic, people were sitting at home, couldn't go to their regular job, so they started a new business. Right? So coming back to, if we want something new, how do we choose? Tuck was singing about that in his song. So it's a 2023, a new year. There are infinite possibilities. Right? So how do we choose? Are we going to continue the patterns we did in 2022? That's an option. Or we can venture out in a new direction. That sounds great, but which direction? Right? Do we get to experience someplace new just so we can have this new experience? Now, I want to warn you that there's no guarantee that new experience is going to be good, because it could be bad. So maybe we want to check it out first, or, that's why AAA made those guides. You can find them online now, but people wanted to know what to expect when they got there, and, realize that the museum is closed on Mondays. You want to show up on Tuesday, right? Those kinds of things. So, and then also we might want to do something where we just stand out. We can be really different. We're going to lift ourselves out from the crowd and be different. And this might require a whole lot of effort. Maybe it requires putting on a mask, because we think that in order to be loved and liked, we have to be just like our, whoever we're admiring ourselves. And maybe that's not really us. So we've got to put this mask on, and maintaining a mask is very difficult to do. So which direction allows us to experience and express who we truly are, our highest self? Now, Ernest Holmes in the reading today was talking about each one of us is a unique expression of spirit. And so it's up to us to delve within and discover who we truly are and be us. That's the best gift we can bring to the world because that's the gift that Spirit's given us. Right? There's a book called Conscious Loving by Gay and Kathleen Hendricks, which is really a wonderful book. And my husband Michael and I have worked our way through the whole book. And so we're going to go back to that ping pong ball analogy. And so I know that it's really easy in a long-term relationship to have a ping pong argument, right? Every couple has them. And so, he or she says something and then the other person feels attacked or becomes defensive and they start attacking back and gets louder and louder and louder and louder and just escalates until there's a major argument. And they maybe even forgot where it started about, but but each one is triggered by something that's less important than the anger and the animosity that starts coming out, and it's a vicious circle. They're hitting that ping pong ball back and forth, and until one of them just storms off, or maybe one of them just shuts down defensively, or puts out that silent treatment. That can be pretty deadly. That was my grandmother's favorite. Or erupts in a physical attack, right? What's an alternative response? And this is what the Hendrickses teach. And so first, when we recognize that our partner or ourselves is overreacting to something, then it's most likely been triggered by a memory from something in the past, or some past hurt or fear, or something maybe that happened a long time ago that they haven't resolved. And so when we see when our partner's triggered, instead of hitting that ping pong ball back or, responding as if we've been attacked, and say, Michael, that's my husband, running the Zoom today. Michael, you seem really upset by whatever it is. Is there something else that's bothering you? And so, particularly if he knows the game and that you're supposed to shift, that allows, it's like, oh, okay. And if he's being fully present, he's going to respond by saying, oh, wow. Yeah, I forgot to pay the credit card bill because I was really worrying about, and it could be something going on in his life now, something major problem at work or a problem with one of his children, or could be something that happened 20 years ago that he still hasn't gotten over for whatever reason. And so as a spouse, partner, we can create the opportunity for them to see that it's still there and look at that rather than going into the ping pong ball. It creates a space to go within and reflect and learn, right? So we want to learn to get to this level of clarity, learn to be able to respond rather than react. Now, Sean Ginwright, in his book, The Four Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves, he describes 4 pivots that we must make if we are going to make a real lasting change in our lives and in society. He's a professor at Cal State San Francisco. He spent more than 20 years working to change the lives of Black youth and Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, and a really effective activist. But he had an aha. He found that he was fighting racism with anti-racism. And that still kept racism entrenched in his own thinking and in all of his interactions. And his actions assumed that racism would continue. He was digging that rut deeper. At the same time, he was fighting anyone else that would try to push him back in the rut, thinking that was the problem, thinking that it was outside of himself. And so his breakthrough came when he switched to the goal of creating a world that did not include racism in the first place. What kind of people, not only how could you fix all those people out there that are, the white supremacists and so forth, but how did he need to change himself, right? And so this is the pivot. And so the skill that he talks about in the, he had to focus from what was going on out there in the external world to contemplate what was going on inside of himself. So he's taught these 4 pivots, and I'm only going to talk about one of them today, which is the pivot going from lens to mirror, he calls it, which means going from analyzing the world to reflecting on our part of what's going on. He began to ask himself, how am I contributing to racism and inequality for all people? How am I contributing to this, right? Now, a lens, when we look through a lens, we see what's out there and we analyze what's going on in the external world to explain why something's happening. And so for ongoing racism, some of the external explanations are white privilege, systematic racism, um, the uh, putting people in jail because we don't have slaves anymore. We'll just have prisoners do all the work. Whatever reason people come up with. For our center, we can analyze some of the things going on here, and the board's going to be talking about this later. But we can explain why our membership has not grown by maybe the impacts of the pandemic, right? People can't find us. Or maybe it's because the high housing costs have reduced the percentage of people who are permanent residents in the North Lake Tahoe area to 20% of the total houses. 20%. That's amazing. I mean, so most people that are here just to here to ski or go out on their boat or whatever. And so it's a smaller pool of people. But these are external things to analyze, and the way out of the rut is not fully explained by these external factors. I still see a bunch of people showing up over there at Garwoods, including the employees, right? They still have employees at the post office. A little bit harder to get them these days, but there is a life, and we have a purpose here, and all of the people that are here are living, breathing, wonderful people that can practice these spiritual principles without being religious that we share. So now, how do we switch to a mirror instead of this lens, away from the analysis? So self-reflection is required. It's really hard. It's a lot harder to blame. It's real easy to blame whatever's going on out there, but it takes time to look within. It's not a change that occurs overnight necessarily, and it requires us to be vulnerable and to have courage to change and to see that we're actually contributing to something that we don't want in our lives anymore. Brene Brown has written a lot about this, and this is one reason that she's so popular is because people have found that this is really the way that change occurs in life. They maybe they do Brene Brown instead of going to a center, but this is part of the spiritual principles about change. It's very important, and so we shift to seeing the world not just as a bunch of pieces that happen to be together, but as an integrated whole. What I do affects Patricia. What Patricia does affects Marilyn, or Ocean as she prefers to be called, or that affects Tuck. I mean, we all affect each other. We're not in it alone. And so, also mirror work helps us to look to other people and see our blind spots. It allows us to see ways that we are affecting other people and ways that we are obstructing ourselves. It's kind of hard to see yourself sometimes, right? And you don't really know what we're doing, and someone will say to us, did you know that and you might have been doing it for 20 years. And no, I never realized that. And I didn't realize it was a problem, but maybe it is, And the maybe, like with the racism, maybe we're unknowingly benefiting from white privilege and don't really see what the difference is, that would be different for someone else. I know when I was a woman engineer, there was a lot of stuff going on that I had to deal with. I had to be better than anyone else, and even then, it wasn't necessarily believed, right? So now Ginwright looked at his actions on racism and his beliefs that were creating resistance to change, and so he did a lot with this mirror work, and there's a lot more to it that I could say, but one of the things that he suggests is that we ask ourselves, what do I really want, right? Now, the external things would be things like money, a better job or better car or whatever kind of thing you want, a vacation. But what it really means to make this level of change, this inner change, is asking for things like peace of mind or happiness, for health and wholeness, for quality, happy relations, right? Relationships. So all of this also requires that we develop hindsight, that we learn from the past experiences so we don't repeat them. We don't send that ping pong ball back again and again. And it requires foresight to anticipate a future that could be different than the past, a future that we really want. We have to dare to think, oh, this could really be true. It could really be possible. And when you're in the bottom of the rut, that takes a lot of effort to do that. But that's why we go within. We've always got that flame of spirit within us to light the way, to assure us that there is a better way, because that's the divine intention. There was a woman named Grace Lee Boggs. She was a Christian, Chinese American civil rights and labor activist, philosopher. She died in 2015 at the age of 100. Right? So she was around a long time, very respected. And she wrote about the relationship between our social world and our inner life. And she said, real lasting social change requires that people not only struggle against existing institutions, they must make a philosophical, spiritual leap and become more human beings. In order to change or transform the world, they must change or transform themselves. Right? So change begins with us. You know, the what's his name? Huh? The the black guy that died. The singer that part of the Jackson Five. Michael Jackson. Thank you. Go. Michael Jackson. Okay. You know, and he and Paul McCartney saying, you know, look in the mirror, change begins, right? Remember that song? Amazing video to it with it as well. But, you know, to find these answers, to transform what it is, we have to self-reflect and look within. And so when we do work within, we discover that river of life within, you know, that Tuck was singing about this morning. You know, the whole process of opening to new beginnings is the easiest and the most powerful if we look within and discover what Ernest Holmes calls a hidden river within each one of us, coming from an invisible but an inexhaustible source. It is the river of life itself, and it flows through everyone. Everyone. And so all that we are is infinite spirit flowing in, through, and as each one of us. We all have that same source, but we express it in our own unique way. And just as each human has that human fingerprint, we are that unique manifestation of the living spirit. So our mission is not to copy others, but to learn how to be ourselves. Discover those gifts that God has already given to us and to develop them, right? And that might take some practice. You know, even the most gifted pianist has to practice and start with learning the scales and all those kinds of things. Some of it they learn by ear, and it's easier for some others, but they still have to practice. You know, I mean, Tuck, I know when you get up, if you haven't practiced, it's different than a song you played 1,000 times, but if it's something new, you're going to learn it, practice it. So the question then, according to Ernest Holmes, is whether or not we are living from this center, or whether we are thinking of ourselves as detached, separate, divided, alone, and inadequate. You know, each of us has a center, and so if we have direct access in that center to the infinite presence, the wisdom of spirit, the guidance of spirit, and so when we live attached, it's like having your computer attached to the internet. It's a lot smarter than when it's just sitting there by itself, right? We have the access to this infinite, seemingly, world of information out there, or just what we've already put into it. So we have to discover this new direction, according to Holmes. He said, what we have to do is surrender what we seem to be to what we really are by identifying ourselves with this divine source of our being and learning to let it direct us, right? Let it direct us. So instead of stressing or straining, we can move forward with clarity, with ease, with calm assurance, right? And when I get stuck on those things, I don't know. If I go through the meditation and I get connected, it's like, oh, I can see that next step, right? I may not be able to see the 10th step, but I can see the next step, the next 5 minutes sometimes. But that's a lot sometimes. And so this real when at from this center level, the real person that's within us, that divine essence of who we are, is always energized by spirit. We won't be weary. We won't fall flat because we've been trying and persevering and doing the same thing over and over again and thinking it's going to change. We will learn to if there's 10 doors, we'll know exactly which one to go through because we'll be guided, right? Work will become play. It's about realizing this, that when we have this pure faith, we have this trust, we have this connection, and we spend our time and energy nourishing that connection with spirit, then we have no fear. We have faith, we have courage, we have energy, we have love that is infinite to heal any situation, right? It's a wonderful thing about the simplicity of all. It's the direct knowingness, right? So every person should take time to become acquainted with themselves and with spirit within, to find God in the only place that we can find God, which is within our own hearts, right? In the book, or the actual radio talk that the reading today came from, Ernest Holmes said, realizing that this divine center within us is love and that the same center exists in love, we shall meet people in love and with consideration, and they will feel something from us, right? So because we are a center of love, we will attract love to us, people that are loving. But we also come up against those people that didn't get the message, right? And there is no way that they want to accept love. But we can always talk to their heart of hearts. I know when my son was growing up, there were some times when I definitely spoke to that essence of spirit within his heart of hearts. But there's a connection there because that connection is never broken because it comes from that one source, right? And so that love is infinite, and it can allow us to be that center of love, and that can transform everything, right? It's really about building our roots deep into spirit, right? And so Ernest Holmes talked about he wasn't worried about people that are afraid of spiritual ideas because he thinks anybody that thinks that he can live without relying on some power greater than themselves would be like a tree that likes to grow without first taking root in the soil in which it lives, right? The soil that gives it life. And however, it would wither and die if it wasn't in the soil, right? So always the roots go down into the soil. They must be equal to the foliage at the top, right? So that's what gives the anchor to allow the tree to be whatever we see above the ground, right? So what is your new direction? Your new beginning for the new year, all right? Think about that. Next week, Sunday, January 15th, we're going to do a visioning for the Center for Spiritual Living Tahoe-Truckee. It's a process of looking inward to our source for our center, for our inspiration, our direction, and energy that applies this same process if it's looking for our individual direction or for our collective direction as a center, our path forward. And so we're inviting members of the congregation or others interested in the future of our spiritual community to come together as one, to listen to Spirit's guidance. Wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there am I also. And there's a magic of being there together with this collective intention, right? And it's a common intention to remember that we are part of the divine intention expressing. We have this vision of embracing all and serving with love while awakening to the one. And that's been the vision with a slight tweak for 20 years for this center. It's a very powerful vision. And 2 years ago, we went through a big process and adopted this great vision of what we're passionate about, what we're best at, and what our resource engine is that sustains us. And it was amazing how consistent it was among all of the people in our center. But it's a great vision, and it may take us 30 years to get all the way there. So next week, we're going to be looking at, okay, God, we're narrowing it down a little bit. 2023. What do we do this year? What is our next step? Right? If we keep trying to always go out there, always living in the future, we'll be waiting for a long time. But we want to know what we need to do now. And that's what we'll be doing. What are the concrete steps that we can create now? So this year, I invite you to come with us on a journey as we learn to live our spiritual principles out loud. It's a journey where we look within to self-reflect on who we are and what we really want. It's a journey where we discover that hidden river of life within each one of us, that flow of the infinite source in each one of us, as each one of us, in our own unique way. Right? It's a journey where we discover our higher self and learn to surrender what seems to be to what we really are by identifying ourselves with this divine source of our being and learning to let it direct us. It's a journey where we root ourselves deeply in spirit and give us that strength and stability and anchor in the spiritual laws of life and reboot ourselves into 2023 and a fantastic future. Transformation, miracles, freedom, and living life out loud are ahead. So join us on the journey. Let's take this to prayer. So as we breathe in and out, we breathe in that energy of life, letting it flow through our being. And as we breathe out, we release whatever we have been resisting. We breathe in life and love and divine energy, and we release all our worries and our fears. We breathe in life and infinite possibilities, and we find ourselves being lifted out of that rut as we breathe out. And we see those possibilities laid out before us. We see that pathway forward. We realize that we are a part of the divine. And around us, every person that we see, everything that we see is a part of this one life expressing itself. And there is this wonderful harmony, like an orchestra that's playing so perfectly, a wonderful melody. Or a simple flautist playing maybe a Native American flute. But whatever it is perfect. It is that energy of life. It is that tingling feeling of feeling fully alive. Wide open spaces. Green lights ahead. Everything is wonderful. Everything is provided that we require. And so we begin this journey by going within, finding God deep within us, whatever we call God, infinite, invisible, spirit, Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Jehovah. It is that one life that is God, and it is everywhere present in all people and all things, and we are one. And so we stand up for wholeness, for love, for harmony, for great things to accomplish together, to love and support each other. And together we lift each other up as the action of spirit in and through and as us. And life is good. I'm so grateful to see this transformation, to be able to release the past, to release the old patterns, and to embrace the new possibilities, and to know what is my path, what is my path forward, and that I move forward in full faith and confidence that I am acting in harmony with the universe, and I meet friendly faces, and all that I need is provided. Ideas, love, joy, just being alive, being whole, and sharing that with the world. Life is so good. Thank you, Father, Mother, God, for your loving presence now and always. And I release these words knowing that it is the spiritual truth and it is done now. And together we say, and so it is.